Hello, good evening, everybody, or wherever you are in the world. Kevin is back. So many people have been asking, when is the next show? Well, here it is, and we've got the biggest story in the world, the Epstein story, burning out of control right now. It's going to bring down the government at this rate. We've got the Streisand effect. The more they're trying to hide it, the more attraction, more interest, the more people are wondering, what the hell is going on? Are these guys just actors? Are all politicians just actors who'll just turn on a dime like that? We shall judge them not by their words, but by their actions. So this evening, Kevin's going to give us his thoughts on this Epstein cover-up. We're going to go back to some of our original content that we did with Kevin, because many of the viewers are new and they've asked for Kevin to go into more detail about the disappearance of the kids when Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip went to Canada, the Native American kids, which was one of the very first podcasts we did with him. And we've got a number of other subjects as well. But huge thank you for coming back on, my friend. How have you been?
Busy as hell, but in a good way.
Would you like to start with the Epstein side of this or the Queen?
Well, it's all connected, especially since Epstein, his link with Andy Boy. But let's recap, like you started mentioning about the whole, originally how I found out about this in working with Native people. And one fallen hero named William Kums, this fellow here, he was a Native man held, like many, in these various internment camps in Canada, run by the Catholics, the Anglicans, my former church, the United Church. And William was in a place called Kamloops and Mission. When he was in Kamloops in October 1964, he witnessed Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip leave with 10 Native children. And these kids were never seen again. And I actually have the transcript, his transcript from the first event we had where we filmed him saying this. He said, I'm an interior Salish spirit dancer and I'm 58 years old. I'm a survivor of the Kamloops Indian School run by the Catholic Church. I suffered terrible tortures there from especially Brother Murphy, who killed 2 children I witnessed. I saw him throw a child off a 3-story balcony to her death. Another one he beat to death. He put me on a rack and broke some of my bones in the Kamloops basement after I tried running away. On October 10th, 1964, I saw Queen of England steal 10 children who we never saw again. I was 12 years old and was at the Kamloops school. The Queen and Prince Philip showed up all by themselves, and we got good food and clothes that day. Then they took a group of us kids with them and some priests to a picnic in a meadow at Deadman's Creek. We all had to kneel and kiss her boot. It was white and laced up. Then I saw the Queen leave the picnic with 7 boys and 3 girls from our school. We never saw those kids again. They were all from the smart group in class. 2 of them were brothers. They were Métis from Quesnel. Their last name was Arnold. I remember a girl called Cecilia and an Edward. My friend George Adolph saw that happen too, but they killed him a little while ago. Now, what happened in the wake of that, William went public with that, and 2 days before he was scheduled to come to London, England in February 2011, he was abducted by RCMP officers, taken down to St. Paul's Catholic Hospital in Vancouver, and he was dead within 48 hours. According to Chloe Kirker, the nurse who treated him, and again, we have her video statement and affidavit, he had all the indications of arsenic poisoning. He had what are called Mies lines on your fingernail where they turn all black, and none of the symptoms of tubercular meningitis, which the official death record said he died of. As it turns out, as the years went by, we documented this more. We discovered that Prince Charles at the time, now King Charles, ordered his execution. We got that from somebody who was in attendance at a meeting in Buckinghamshire when Charles's security advisor, Major Johnny Thompson, basically ordered the killing of William because he was a, quote, terrorist who was threatening the life of the royal family. And so that is, connects Charles into the whole scene, but also his brother, because the whole Andrew situation with Epstein is yet another tip of the iceberg. Because I'll give you an example of that. Both all the members of the Windsor so-called royal family are heavy investors in what's called Rio Tinto. And they have the blood of other Native people on their hand. These 10 people were all murdered in one night in September 2022. 6 of the 10 were relatives of Chief Wally Burns in central Saskatchewan, where discovered over $2 billion in diamonds. Well, Chief Wally Burns was the only band councillor who opposed the diamond mining. The next week, 6 of his relatives are killed by a lone gunman with a knife who then conveniently dies in RCMP prison. And the band council then go ahead and approve the mining by Rio Tinto. Now, that's a heavily owned Crown corporation. And the Windsors profit directly from this. As a matter of fact, it was estimated that Queen Elizabeth, during her reign, increased her personal wealth by over 50 times. She was heavily invested in Inco, in all these resource corporations that are bleeding Canada dry and have for many years. And Andrew was, in fact, a go-between in this whole thing because he was a trade commissioner that set up these links with China, which is, again, one of the big owners of a co-investor in Rio Tinto. So wherever you find great wealth like this and the murder of Indigenous people happening, you always find that goes along with it child trafficking in a huge way. And, we know a little bit about his relationship with Epstein, a woman called Virginia Giuffre, if I can pronounce her name right. She was sex trafficked to Andrew by Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Virginia Giuffre then brought a lawsuit against Prince Andrew that was settled out of court in January 2022. And yet, I don't know if you know this, but 3 months ago, she commits suicide in Australia, even though she was in a custody battle for her 3 children with her ex-husband, who she claimed had been beating her and everything. So what's interesting, Jeffrey Epstein, quote, commits suicide soon after this thing breaks. And then she commits suicide as soon as the connection with Epstein and others is breaking in the news. So, combined with the murder of these Indigenous people, William Kums, these 10 Cree natives in Saskatchewan, the bloody trail is leading back once again to the Windsor royal family and Andrew in particular. So, this is kind of an overview of what we're dealing with, although there's a lot more to it than what we've described so far.
Yeah, it's frightening, Kevin, to find out that this network is just completely global, completely interlinked. European royal families, American politicians, you got the huge corporations, the people at the top of business, military industrial complex, big oil, big pharma, etc. And they completely control the media so that even though they're just there behind the scenes doing all these heinous things to kids, the mainstream media is keeping everybody distracted and looking at other things and not thinking too deeply. Is that some kind of MK Ultra mind control operation they're doing on the population?
Well, when you think about it, Shaun, by keeping focused on particular individuals, that's part of the operation, because then people aren't questioning, well, what's causing it? Where's it coming from? Why does the whole system protect these people? That's the issue we always look at. And so you scratch the surface of any of this and a whole bunch of other actors appear. Another example of this is Prince Andrew was a graduate of a place in Canada called the Lakefield College School. And it was one of these elite preppy schools like you have in England. He was good friends with the principal there, a guy called Keith Gleed, who is an Anglican minister. This Keith Gleed was a convicted child rapist. And soon after Prince Andrew, who went there for a while as a young boy, and then he used to come back and dedicate buildings there and everything, this Keith Gleed dies under mysterious circumstances. Again, another quote, suicide, as soon as his link with Prince Andrew is established. And what's interesting, too, is that this Keith Gleed was an Anglican clergyman, and he's best friends with the guy who just retired as Archbishop in Canada, Fred Hiltz, who played a major role in shutting down the only dig that's ever happened. The only accredited dig of a mass grave at an Indian school in Canada is what we conducted in 2011 and 2012 in Brantford, Ontario. We were invited by the Grand River Mohawk elders to dig there. We found bones on the site of where eyewitnesses said they buried children. The bones proved to be those of children, confirmed by Smithsonian Institute in Washington. Fred Hiltz, this archbishop, good friend with this, child raping buddy of Prince Andrew's, he silences everybody and orders the destruction of all of this stuff. And so when you look at the whole web, you're right, it's part of this global network, but it's been around for a long time, as long as the British Empire has been around. And it always keeps going back to the same actors. But what they need to do, of course, it makes it look like, well, there are these bad apples. Don't forget, Prince Andrew was stripped of his various titles, his role in various charities. Before Queen Elizabeth died, they kind of used him as a scapegoat to kind of, like with Epstein himself, everybody vents their 3 minutes of rage on these individuals without asking the bigger question: why is it legal for children to be killed, for this stuff to happen, and people's wrists get slapped? You got to ask fundamental questions about what we're living under, and that leads to another subject we want to get into today, which is the alternative people are building to this corrupt crown corporate system, including in England, where they're on the verge of announcing a new sovereign republic like we did in Canada 2015.
Well, before we get to that, let's expand a bit more on this subject. So Trump and his team, Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, etc., for months, some of them for years, have been campaigning on the release of the Epstein Files. Pam Bondi said they were on her desk, etc. This was an absolute, of paramount importance to release these files, drives, legal paperwork, client list, whatever they had. The public deserved to have this information. Now they're all in power, and all of a sudden we're being told there is no list, there is no clients, there were no high-profile people using these girls. It's all been concocted. It's a hoax, Trump said. It's a hoax. And he's putting it on the Clinton, Obama era, Russiagate, that kind of thing, which is just a bizarre confabulation. So how can this crew of people who campaigned, promised their supporters they were going to get to the bottom of this and put this information out there, how can they all be saying, nothing to see here, folks, move on, that abruptly and that condescendingly?
Well, that's the business as usual. Anyone who gets in power, I mean, it's the extent to which everyone on the ground had some mass delusion that Trump was somehow different than everybody else, right? It's been proven. And all of these things are opportunities to learn from our own experience. None of this should surprise people when they know, I remember I.F. Stone, he was a Washington muckraking journalist for many years, and he said, all governments are run by liars. Nothing they say should ever be believed. That was like after 50 years of experience in Washington, D.C., right? It doesn't ever change because it's not about the individuals and what they promise. The people who move in those elite corporate circles, it's like a radio commentator told me once in Vancouver. He said, these people pass children around like a good bottle of wine. They're totally protected. There's nothing you can ever do to stop it. Right? It's that simple. The only thing you can do to stop it is change their system and get rid of the thing requiring that these crimes go on and that the elites protect themselves with impunity like this. So a point on when you mentioned Pam Bondi, she, before being Attorney General, she was a lobbyist for the private prison industry in America. Now, like in England, they have these corporations like GEO, that make a lot of money for everybody they lock up. I was just talking to a common law group in Texas where some of their members have been arrested and put away for 25 years for failure to appear in court. A misdemeanor suddenly gets in jail for 25 years because Pam Bondi and Trump need to criminalize misdemeanors to stick people away in prison for as long as possible so that they can make money for their corporate buddies, Geo. And, she's an investor, as is Trump, no doubt. We already know Trump International launders money for the Mexican drug cartels, who are the major, people trafficking human beings. So remember when Trump began to separate the children of the, quote, illegal immigrants locked up in prison? A lot of these people aren't deported. They go into the private prison business, and they make a lot of money for people like her and him. So the thing to look at, you always say follow the money. Money always acts in the same way. And I hope people learn from this and realize that we're dealing with a whole system. Forget about the personalities, they're hand puppets, including the people who seem to be in charge, right?
Yeah, so they have investments in the private prison industries, and every person who gets arrested, they get $60,000 in America of taxpayers' money per year per person. So it's essential for the growth of these prisons that more people are incarcerated and more things are criminalized. So they're just looking for any excuse to give people these long sentences. Kevin said these guys are getting 20-year sentences. Well, if you multiply 20 by 60,000, 10 by 60,000 is 600,000. That's $1.2 million of your taxpayers' money per year per person going into the pockets of these scummos who've got investments in the private prison industries. Anything to add to that, Kevin?
Well, it's a huge growing business. It's why ICE, the immigration police in America, are now the most heavily funded law enforcement agency in America, because under the hype of all the scare about immigrants, they're forgetting certain basic facts. If it wasn't for undocumented aliens in America, the economy would lose over $20 billion, because most of these illegal immigrants are the ones who work in construction, in the hospital industry, picking fruit and vegetables. So you're gutting your own economy when you do away with this labor force, and prices are going to go through the roof, right? The other thing, too, is that under the U.S. Constitution, slavery is legal. In the 13th Amendment that the U.S. Congress and the government passed in 1865 at the end of the Civil War, it said slavery and enforced servitude is banished everywhere in America, except if you've sentenced in court, basically, if you're serving a sentence for which you've been lawfully convicted. That means anyone in prison is still a legal slave. It's why they either don't pay the forced labor or prison. And I know, having worked in prison ministry in America and Canada, prisoners are lucky to make $1 a day. It's this huge, over 11 million people now are legal slaves in America, working for nothing. You see them driving through Florida and Texas. You see these guys in orange suits, chained together, working on the side of the road, like in slave days. So that's the point. It's a new slave trade and slave industry out of which people like Trump and Bodney and others are making the megabucks. And that's what it's all about, right?
So slavery was abolished under the US Constitution, except for people convicted of crimes. So they left a loophole whereby they could make people work for zero pay or pittance, provided they criminalized them. And a lot of the blacks and stuff, when they were freed, they brought in laws about loitering and marijuana use, etc., just so they could criminalize them to put them back into the prison system. But there is someone in the prison system I want to talk about, and I'm gonna get her picture up here now, and that is Maxwell, because she now is saying, well, guess what, folks? If the client list is a fabrication, then I didn't transport anybody to anybody. My whole case is a fabrication. Hence, I should be getting released immediately. What do you think to Galen's demand to get out based on what Trump and his cronies are saying?
Well, don't forget, like, scapegoats are always used first to distract and grab our attention so the real culprits and other culprits can get away. But once it's happened and the smoke is clear, they'll let them out. They always do. It's like when Catholic priests or archbishops and cardinals and everyone are caught killing and trafficking children, they farm them out somewhere. They put them on early retirement, and then a few years later, they've been moved around to some other diocese. I mean, it's how they take care of each other. So none of that should surprise us, right?
Exactly. So you're saying that when the story is not so popular in the news, then she's going to get out because she's probably protected. Because we saw Jeffrey Epstein get unalived. We saw his other procurer, Jean-Luc Brunel, get unalived by the exact same means in prison in France. Yet Galen, who's been at the top of the pyramid, is still breathing. And it seems that she had a particularly close relationships with the Clinton crime family. What do you think about the Clintons' role in all this? Because people are saying there is no client list. I would personally, I would allege that Bill Clinton would be at the top of the bloody client list.
Well, don't forget, we're never allowed to see except things that these people want us to see. So I mean, even the talk of a client list, they don't need a client list. They can do whatever they want. They're above the law. So I mean, things like that are released as trial balloons and fog to just keep the real question not just hidden, but to give people a sense of being immobilized. Because if you continue to show all the time to people that these people are above the law and can do whatever they want, what is the effect of that on people? The effect is to feel despair. And what can you do? I get this all the time from people. What can you do? There's just too much to fight. That's mind control. That's part of a program. The individuals don't matter. I mean, if you put any of us in the situation Bill Clinton was in or anything, a good chunk of us would end up doing exactly what he's doing. It isn't like good guy, bad guy. It's what the system creates. And our whole thing is like, I believe, and I've seen this up close, that the system is so corrupt and so gone now that there has to be the thing's got to be flushed and we got to start again. And a lot of people on the ground realize that, right? But it doesn't start by always focusing on them, because ultimately they don't matter. I remember there was this great quote from the French Revolution. A revolutionary called Camille Desmoulins said, "The great only appear great because we are on our knees. Let us rise." So when we rise and assert our own sovereignty and take back the world for ourselves, these people don't matter. We'll lock them up. We'll forget about them, right? But right now, when people are so divided and don't have a sense of their power, that it seems really important what these guys are doing. Ultimately, it's somebody said that revolutions happen when two things occur. The old system can't work anymore, and the people within it are so fed up they don't want it to work anymore. And I think we've reached that point morally and spiritually in the world. So many people are just so sick and tired of all this crap that we're open for something new. I see that everywhere. I mean, I had a friend in Chicago. He took one of my books into a Catholic church to try to talk to a Catholic priest about the policy of crimin. Next thing you know, he's arrested. The priest calls a cop. My friend's taken down, given an order to appear. He walks into a room, there's a camera on him. And a voice out of the camera says, "How do you plead?" And he says, "What do you mean, plead? This is not a court." He said, "No, you have to plead." And he said, "I'm not. This is not due process. I want to face a judge." He's found sentenced in front of this camera. Got 6 months in prison, like for what? For talking to a priest about a book? Like, that's how far things have gone. And it's the same in England. My friend Owen Lucas went through the same thing. He posted one thing on Facebook the system didn't like. He's in Swansea jail for 3 months. No charge, nothing. We're living in a police state, right? So not only shouldn't we be surprised, but we should got to shift our focus away from the things that they're trying to keep our head in, this little bubble of issues that don't really matter, into what really matters is, how do we change this? How do we take back this world for everybody and stop these rich criminals from doing whatever the hell they want, right?
So you got a question from Anne-Marie. Do you think they are just throwing it in our faces to show us we are simply the plebs and have zero rights, that they are putting us in our place? I'm just going to crack a window open. I'll be right back.
Well, I'll respond. We have any rights we want to exert. You don't have rights until you practice them, right? And they're not putting us in our place. We put ourselves in our place. We think, oh, there's nothing I can do. But I'll tell you, we showed in Canada and other places in the world that if you persist and you don't back down, the system is an illusion that starts disappearing their power, because it is an illusion. It's fraud, and it relies on us thinking we're powerless. So that's why right now our focus is on training people, educating them, and mobilizing them. Because once a few of us start doing that, I mean, how did we force the truth of genocide in Canada? 24 of us. How do we force Pope Benedict out of office? We just never gave up, and we put it in their face publicly all the time. That's our power, right?
So Anne-Marie sent a follow-up question. Kevin, who would take first place as the most evil character of all the swamp dwellers you have mentioned so far tonight?
I don't even know how to answer that, because what's most evil? I mean, it's like comparing good and bad Nazis, I guess. I don't know. But the point is, like what the real evil is not what they're doing, because that's what, I've seen human degradation. I've dealt with the victims. I've seen this evil up close. That's not the evil. The evil is when we cooperate with it and do nothing about it. That's the real problem. That's the question. We should be looking in the mirror and say, what am I going to do now to link up with other people and end this, right? Because, there's an urgency here that I think a lot of people lack, and that is, look at where we're going. We have to create alternatives, and we don't have a future, right?
It's the whole apparatus, isn't it? When you've got a number of evil people coming together, working in unison, they can achieve, what they achieve is a multiple of what they can achieve individually. So it just generates this, it becomes this big evil apparatus that's manipulating people all over the world and doing these horrific things to kids. And I'm sorry, go on, Kevin.
No. I was just thinking that when you were talking, that quote from Martin Luther King came to mind when he said, "At the end, I will remember not the lies of my enemies, but the silence of my friends." And I think that that's the moral issue, that we have to ask ourselves, what am I doing and what can I do tomorrow to lend a hand in stopping this? And it's a lot easier to stop than people realize, because these people, they hate exposure. And they hate people acting on the exposure. Even just standing outside one of these Catholic churches, it makes the priests go ballistic, because they know you're telling the truth. We know they're trafficking children, and they don't want people to know. So, it's like in the art of war, you provoke your enemy to destroy itself. And it's so easy to do now, because these are big targets we're dealing with, right? And they can't hide. So, it's an invitation to act.
Which ties into this question from Jason. What can we do to beat this psychopathic parasitic system? So you guys took to the streets, didn't you, Kevin, and went into the churches like you said and stuff?
That was an important thing to break the ice when we began to not only protest, but actually go into the churches. And with the help, we had a lot of advantages. We had hard evidence, we had witnesses, and we had Indigenous people who had never ceded land legally to any of the churches. So they said, like they were doing already, we go in and reclaim these churches as reparations for centuries of murder of our people. The cops always stood back. I never had an incident once where a cop intervened and stopped us from doing this. They knew we were in the right. The law was on our side. The local chiefs had issued eviction orders against these churches. All of us can do that. Magna Carta, Section 61, allows anyone in England to seize all of the property and wealth of the crown if they violated the rights laid out in Magna Carta. We can do it legally. Just take back the country, start doing it. That's what they're afraid of. They're not afraid of protests. They're not afraid of words and interviews. What they're afraid of is acting on it and reclaiming everything in our own name. That's the whole basis of setting up these sovereign common law republics, and that we're doing it as we speak. So, I mean, that's kind of the short and the long version of what we need to do, but we need to take personal responsibility, and that's the difference, because we can't wait for somebody else to do it. Right.
So we've got almost 1,500 watching live across all of the platforms right now. And I just want to remind everybody that Kevin has a number of books out. We've got all of his links in the description box below this video. And it's very important. His life has been on the line literally with this over the years. He's had multiple attempts on his life. It's very important that we support his work. So you got book links down there, documentary links. Even his email is down there if you want to reach out and contact him directly. So we've got a question here from Katz. It feels daunting fighting evil alone. And as a woman, what advice can you give about who you can trust?
It's a difficult thing, because in this day and age, the biggest problem is our own lack of trust and our own experience, especially if you've been traumatized and harmed, right? Never an easy thing. But what I have learned dealing with my own trauma, and in my lowest moment, when I had everything stripped from me and I lost my children and livelihood and living out of my car, I realized what I used to do is I'd get on the bus in Vancouver and drive around to be with people, the energy being with other human beings, or that day when William Kums came with us in the church and occupied it, when he couldn't go anywhere near a church without getting physically ill because of the way they had tortured him as a young boy. He was in there smiling, handing out flyers. He had lost his fear because he had all of our energy around him as a protective cloak. And we tend to be, the more aware you become, you tend to become more isolated because you don't find anything in common with the people you once knew, right? And your own family. You need to find a new family. You don't find it in the bubble of your own head or in front of a screen. You find it out in the world. And that's why everything we do is oriented on bringing people together. We hold assemblies. We hold common law court inquiries. We hold picnics. Just get out in nature, The Schumann resonance. The human brain is the same wavelength as that of the earth, right? Just get out on Mother Earth and recover yourself. Hold events where you're upholding those life-giving things. And it takes an act of will to get over that hurdle. Once you've been harmed a lot, it's very difficult. But with each other, we've proven that it works. So always look for those group responses, right, to what we're in.
I'm going to put the flag on the screen and then ask you the next question, which is, so with the new sovereign republic forming in Britain, tell us exactly why this is happening now and how the common law court conviction of QE2 led to it, like in Canada.
So I think I sent you the flag of Albion, actually. I don't know if you've got it.
Oh, we've got that one as well. Let me have a look.
Yeah,
a few flags in these emails.
That's our Canada flag. And 2015, we adopted that. And we've had flag raisings all over the country. It's great. We tear down the Canadian flag and we raise this, and, reclaim the area. So.
Oh, I see what you're talking about. This one with the tree on it.
Yes. Okay. So.
Yeah, got it.
The story on this is, for a number of years, people have been talking about setting up a republic and really reestablishing the republic that, of course, was first created in 1649 when another Charles, had his head cut off. And for 11 years, there was a republic where the Act of Parliament in March 1649 abolished the monarchy in the House of Lords and made it an act of treason to try to reestablish the monarchy. So Charles II comes along, does a military coup, reimposes the monarchy, but that's not a de jure power. That went against the will of Parliament and the people. It's a de facto power. So the Crown of England has no lawful authority, in other words, and hasn't had, for centuries. So in the last few months, what's been a real spur, and actually, Shaun, our programs brought a lot of people out of the closet on this stuff. And there's now organizing committees working all around England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And they're going to be releasing a constitution very soon and a declaration of independence from the British Crown. They call it the Republic of Albion because that's from Elba, the Scottish, it's a Gaelic word. The stars represent England, Scotland, Ireland, and Northern Ireland and Wales. And the Great Tree of Life. Now, these are in the memory of people in England. These are ancestral memories we're drawing on because it's the understanding that the rights of the people predate all monarchs, predate all statute. They're basic common law liberties to govern ourselves. And what's going on in England now is the same kind of police state as you have in America. This corporatocracy that disregards the rule of law and the will of the people. So it's a really neat thing that's happened because America and England have always had this cross-pollination going on. Like when the Republic was defeated, a lot of those soldiers of Cromwell's New Model Army, guess where they went? They went over to New England and America, and they helped create the vision of America, right? And then now from America, it's gone back across the ocean again. That's because common law has had universal jurisdiction. It lives in the hearts and minds of everybody, regardless of what the tradition in your country. So it's very exciting now because in the fall, we'll be holding events in England. They're going to be actually holding a first constitutional convention. There'll be a lot of news on that. I hope to be there, and which would be interesting because the last time I was there, as you know, I was deported from Stansted Prison. And, some of the folks some of the folks in Albion said, "Well, we'll smuggle you in by submarine off the coast of Cornwall, Kevin." I said, "Hell no! I'm going to come through the front door. I'm coming, to Stansted or where they deported me from, and we're going to have people there. And we're going to film it. Say, you want to lock me up? Go right ahead. What am I doing illegal? It's you guys who are the criminals." And so we're going to be doing that in September, and there'll be a lot more on that. But I'm just really excited talking to these folks on these calls. They're wonderful people. Some of them are doing back to the land things. We've linked up with farmers in places around England that are. It's like the 100th monkey. People are all reaching the understanding that we need to be self-sufficient again and sovereign. So they're becoming food self-sufficient. They're setting up their own schools and pulling their kids out of these strange curriculum now where they're teaching kids about oral sex when they're 5 years old. I mean, all of these corrupting influences, people want to reestablish healthy relationships with the earth and each other. And that's what's exciting about this. People are doing it for themselves in England. And just like in America and Canada and all over the world. So I look forward to this, to sharing more about that. And if people want to find out, actually, there is an email, Republic of Albion, one word, Republic of Albion at proton.me, like me, Republic of Albion at proton.me. And that's, you can reach the organizing committee and they can tell you a lot more. They've even adopted a draft constitution modeled on the American and the Canada Constitution, where, for example, they have no law can be passed in the Republic unless it's ratified by local assemblies of the people. So it's devolving power